Hi everyone, a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. My name is Pratik and I'll be discussing the news today for 2nd September 2025. So as usual, we'll highlight the first main news. So in the first news, we have the Immigration and the Foreigners Act 2025 comes into effect. Second news, Supreme Court considers revision of its RTE judgment. Third, SCO adopted Tianjin Declaration. Fourth, One Sanrakshan Evam Samvardhan Amendment Rules 2025 comes into effect. Fifth, Marine Biodiversity Agreement or BBNJ Agreement also inches closer. In the places in news, we have Afghanistan. So let us start with the very first news, which is Immigration and Foreigners Act 2025, which has come into force from today. And if you look at the syllabus mapping, it is part of General Studies paper 2. So whenever any law is passed, we need to understand the reasons why it has been passed or the salient features, and we also need to understand the rationale behind it. And in terms of its overlap with internal security, we also need to understand that how it impacts the internal security. So we'll take a look at this. So basically, this law was tabled in the parliament in the monsoon session, and recently it has come into effect. So first of all, we'll talk about the importance or the reasons why it is coming into picture. So the most important reason why this bill has been passed or this law has been passed is because immigration is not just merely one issue. It impacts multiplicity of factors, or it has multiple effect, right? So impacts the national security, it impacts the economy, it also impacts the natural or the regional ecosystem of that place. So for that reason, this law has been passed. So the number one reason is that it is essentially for national security. The second important reason why this law has come into effect is because the earlier laws, we'll discuss or we'll take a look into some of the other laws as well. So all of these laws were very old and they were fragmented in nature. So in a way, they were not modern in its orientation, and they did not also take into consideration several changes which have come up with respect to the migration patterns, especially when it comes to integration of data and technology. So in order to update all these aspects, this was one of the reasons that was there for the implementation of the law. The third one is essentially to promote tourism, because it will ensure that those who are coming as migrant or as foreigners, they have been given adequate safeguards and protection. So essentially it has all these reasons, as a result of which it was passed. So if you look at the key features about the act, so essentially it regulates a couple of things in terms of entry. So whenever anyone comes to the country, that is entry of or immigration. Secondly, it is about the stay. So what should be the regulation in terms of the stay? And thirdly, with respect to the exit of the foreigners, right? Then it has replaced four laws as of now. So first is the Passport Entry into India Act. So this particular act regulated entry into India. Second, Registration of Foreigners Act 1939. So this act essentially registered all those foreigners who had arrived in India. So it was basically regarding that. Third was about Foreigners Act of 1946 in terms of all the other liabilities and all the other protection accorded to the foreigners who have arrived in India. And lastly, about the Immigration Carriers Liability Act. So carriers essentially are those agents who bring the foreigners into Indian territory. So what are their liabilities? That was described in this particular act. So if you look into this, these three laws are pre-independence law, and therefore they were very archaic, and they did not integrate technology, or they did not have any recent incorporated changes which required certain important aspects. So for that purpose, this Act has been passed. So what exactly are some of the important features, right? So when it comes to prelims, it is very important that we are aware of the key features of any act. When it comes to mains, apart from the features, we should also be aware of the rationale. So we have just discussed the rationale. Now we'll discuss how these ideas are put into picture. So firstly, registration. All those who are coming to India as foreigners must register with an officer on arrival. And if they forge their document, if they do not do this, then they may be considered as it will be considered as an offense. Second, there is a reporting obligation by the carriers, including and hotels, universities, hospitals, those which are attracting foreigners. They are also supposed to report that we have these many foreigners as part of our customers, right? Third, in case they commit any offense in terms of illegal entry without specific visa, right? So this will attract criminal provision, or it will have up to 5 years jail or 5 lakh fine or both. So they have clearly established what is going to be the ramification if they do not agree to legal entry. Fourth, to incorporate all these aspects, we need a body that would dedicatedly look into all these aspects. And for that, Bureau of Immigration has been established. And this body will be responsible to manage the visa, entry, transit, stay, and movement. So all these aspects will be centralized, and there will be a biometric ID that will be given to all those migrants or the foreigners, and it will be managed by the Bureau of Immigration. Then there are also arrest powers which have been given to any officer which is above the post of head constable. They can arrest without warrant, sorry. And there is control of permission. Civil authority may close or refuse entry to places frequented by foreigners if there is any indication that they are indulging into any anti-national activities, right? So these are some of the key highlights of the act. Now, if you look at the previous year question that have come from this topic, there's a question from internal security that came in 2014, and that question was how illegal trans-border migration does pose a threat to India's security. Discuss the strategies to curb this, bring out the factors which give impetus to such migration. So in the strategies part, we can talk about the recently passed Immigration and the Foreigners and the Immigrants Act of 2025. Now let's move to the second news, which is Supreme Court considers revision of its judgment exempting minority institutions from RTE Act. So this essentially is part of GS2 polity, where we and also GS2 social justice as well, because education is part of our social justice. Next, we'll discuss what exactly is the context. So back in 2014, there was a case in which it was highlighted that the minority education institutions which are created in India under Article 30, Clause 1, they should also be part of the Right to Education initiative, right? So in India, we have right to education as part of fundamental right under Article 21A. Within this, there is a specific section called 12(1)(c). So Section 12(1)(c) of RTE Act, it basically says that all the educational institutions should have at least 25% of the students from disadvantaged section of society. So that was the basic mandate of Section 12(1)(c) of RTE Act. Now the problem was that whether this would be applicable to the minority education institutions or not. So in 2014 case, which was referred to as, or which is known as Pramiti Educational and Cultural Trust case, Supreme Court gave the judgment that the minority education institutions will be exempted from this reservation provision. So the section 12(1)(c) of RTE will not be applicable to the minority educational status, because that will infringe upon their autonomy and in terms of their right to educate their own community, right? So for that purpose, this was the matter that was closed at that point of time, but it was raised again recently when the Supreme Court has referred this matter to Chief Justice of India for a possible review. And in this reason, what exactly has been given, or what exactly have been the key observation of the Supreme Court? So the Supreme Court has given three major observations. So let me summarize what the key observation is. First is, the implementation of the RTE Act does not erode or does not diminish the minority character protected under Article 30 Clause 1. This is the observation. Why? Because of this reason, that Article 21A and Article 30 Clause 1 can and must exist mutually. So the point is that on one hand, you want to preserve the cultural autonomy and educational rights of the minority, and on the other hand, you want to promote the educational rights of the disadvantaged. The Supreme Court judge has mentioned or has observed that can we not ensure that these can exist in a mutual way? And this is what is at the heart of contention. So Supreme Court has also clarified that the 25% reservation can be provided to the children from the minority community itself. So it doesn't mean that in the 25% reservation, it has to be from all, or it has to be from every community or the majority community also. The minority education institutions can also reserve this same category or the same number only for the minority educational students also, those who are from disadvantaged community. In this way, both section 12(1)(c) and uh, article 21A can be reconciled. So the idea is that we want to promote the cultural and educational rights of the minorities, that is fine. But at the same time, we do not want to deny the students who are from uh, disadvantaged section from the benefit of education. And this observation basically provides a reconciliation of these aspects. But anyhow, this part is now referred to CGI, and the CGI can reserve this matter for a higher bench. If you look at the right of children to free and compulsory education, which is also known as Right to Education Act, what are the major features? So it makes free and compulsory education a fundamental right for all the children of ages 6 to 14. So this was enacted, or it was a legal way in which Article 21A was manifested. So after the Unni Krishnan versus State of AP case, it was basically considered that right to elementary education has to be considered as part of fundamental right. Okay, and here, as part of 86th constitutional amendment, right to education the this act was Article 21A was passed, and therefore this act was passed to give effect to this act, okay, or this article. So what is the basic or one of the provision here is it mandates private schools to reserve 25% of its seats for the economically and socially backward disadvantaged children. Third, it provides that appropriate government would ensure that children belonging to disadvantaged group and weaker section are not prevented from completely the elementary education on any ground. So basically, it mandates that the central and the state governments, education being a concurrent subject, that both of the level of the government must ensure that all the children are given education, state education facilities, uh, especially at the elementary level. Now, we also know that we have National Education Policy to 2020, where there is a huge emphasis on on the early childhood care and education. And here we are following the 5+3+3+4 structure where the 5 year here will start from age 3, from the kindergarten, and then LKG and UKG, and then class 1 and 2. Here it is from class 1 onward, because at the age 6, you will generally students go to class 6, right? If you look at the previous year question that came from RT, now try to take a look at this. This question is slightly difficult because it goes here. You need to know the exact provision of RTE to explain or to unravel this question. But if you look at this question, so first statement is, as per the Right to Education Act, to be eligible for appointment as a teacher in a state, a person would be required to possess the minimum qualification laid down by the concerned state council of teacher education. So this part is not correct. It is basically the national council. Okay. So this statement is not correct. So if you have eliminated one, then this and this will be eliminated. So you just have to ensure that which of the second or third statement is correct. Second statement says that as per the RTE Act, for teaching primary classes, a candidate is required to pass a teacher eligibility test conducted in accordance with the National Council of Teacher Education Guidance, which is correct. So definitely this would be not correct. In India, more than 90% of teacher education institutions are directed under the state government, which is not correct. It is central government. So the right answer will be B. So the point is that whenever any question comes on such topics, because this is essentially part of rights issues as part of your prelims. So there is one of the topics which is mentioned as rights issues. So you have to know about all the other aspects of rights, including fundamental rights, statutory rights, constitutional rights, and legal rights. So right to education is basically has several features. So we need to know some of the important aspects such as teacher eligibility, education, and test. Next, let's talk about the third news, which is about very important news. 25th Council of Heads of State Summit of the SCO Adopted Tianjin Declaration. Tianjin is in China, and recently China has conducted the SCO Heads of State Summit, in which a joint declaration was able to be drafted this time. Earlier in the previous summit, it was not possible because India did not accept, or India had certain reservation with the terrorism clause, right? So here, this is of course from GS paper 2, international relations, especially from the perspective of the global institutions or regional institutions which are there. And then we'll also be looking into some of the important aspects. So they had taken some of the important declaration in terms of terrorism, in terms of reforming the global governance, and also in terms of sustainable development goals. So basically, they have adopted three major declarations. And it is also important for us to understand what exactly has been the statement given by the Prime Minister at this summit, especially when considering that this comes at the backdrop of India's growing tension with the United States, right? So here the Prime Minister has provided three pillars of the Shanghai Cooperation of Organization in terms of this acronym SCO itself, which is easy to understand, and it is also highly effective. What exactly is this that we'll understand? First acronym is security. So first pillar of SCO is security. So Prime Minister Modi has mentioned that security is one of the most important aspect of any country's national security, national development, or national interest. And security is threatened by terrorism. It is threatened by extremism, radicalism. So the point that the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned, that we need to take a regional approach or an integrated approach to tackle all these menace or all these manifestation of terrorism first. Secondly, in line with Operation Sindoor, or the doctrine that we took after or post Operation Sindoor, that no country shall distinguish between the state-sponsored terrorism, and the non-state actors, right? So there shall not be any discrimination of any sort of terrorism. Third, it is important that terrorist finance infrastructure is also dismantled. So again, there were several initiatives that India has also taken to address this, including cooperation in the SCO rats. Secondly, with respect to connectivity, it is important pillar of SEO because without connectivity, it is not possible to develop mutual trust. So connectivity is not just important for enhancing trade, it is equally important to enhance trust and also to build mutual benefit or mutual support, plus bring cultural cooperation, cultural and economic cooperation. So connectivity is one of the important pillar of India's foreign policy. Be it ASEAN, we have connectivity as one of the 3C policy. So with ASEAN, India has adopted this policy of 3C as part of the Act East policy, which basically includes commerce, connectivity, and culture. So India is trying to use the same uh, idea here as well, that connectivity will help us become more integrated in terms of understanding each other's culture, and it will help us build more trust. And how this will be done? India has undertaken initiative like International North-South Transit and Transfer Corridor and the port in Iran, the construction that is going on. Then we have, at the same time, one important thing that the Prime Minister mentioned here, that connectivity shall not be in violation of sovereignty. It should not come as or against sovereignty of a country. And this was an indirect reference to the BRI projects or the Belt and Road Initiative of China, and especially the CPEC project, China Pakistan Economic Corridor, which passes through the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So, what the Prime Minister Modi has mentioned is that we do require connectivity for greater integration, greater trade, and cultural cooperation. At the same time, it should not be at the behest of sovereignty and integrity of the country. Third, with respect to opportunity, the Prime Minister has mentioned that we need to provide more opportunity for reforming and for transforming. And this was primarily directed in terms of the areas of global governance. Global governance include how WTO is now not working properly, or how it is very much important for us to reform United Nations. So basically, the agenda of global governance was there as part of opportunity. In fact, Prime Minister also mentioned about global civilizational projects as well as part of opportunity. So this basically all these pillars of SEO found its reflection in the joint declaration of Tianjin. And what are the basic pillars of this? So first is was about the security pillar, which the Prime Minister mentioned as S. So here we have regional conflicts and for non-proliferation. The first part was that all the countries, they expressed doubts or opposed double standards in counterterrorism and urged global cooperation as far as terrorism is concerned. Secondly, they condemned Pahalgam terror attack, which was a first time they had done it in a joint manner. At the same time, they did not mention Pakistan specifically, right? Thirdly, they criticized US/Israel military strikes on Iran, especially at their nuclear sites. The second area of declaration was in terms of UN reforms, where they wanted to push for greater representation of developing countries, especially in the UN Security Council. Third, in terms of sustainable development and the social agenda, first was it advocated equal AI rights for all nations, and secondly, it reaffirmed vision of one earth, one family, one future. If you look at this doctrine, this is very much taken from India's Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam philosophy. right? So Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, it is very much aligned with India's policy on global family or global affairs. Now, China has also taken certain initiatives to expand the influence of SCO more than or in various location or in various sectors. So first thing is in terms of technology, members of SCO can now access China's Beidou satellite system, which is an alternative to GPS navigation. Secondly, for finance, China has pledged around 1.4 billion loans for a period of 3 years, and it has also proposed an SCO development banks, which is very much similar to the new development banks of BRICS. Third, in terms of diplomacy, China has hosted SCO Plus Summit. And in that summit, members, observers, dialogue partners were also a participant of that. So in terms of understanding the SCO, especially for the prelims perspective, it is important that we know about the structure and mandate. In fact, UPSC has several times asked about the structure or the members country of a particular organization several times. Last year, it has asked about NATO and also about BIMSTEC, I guess, right? So we also need to be prepared. So here, what are some of the basic facts regarding SCO? First is that its headquarter is in Beijing, China, and its genesis is lies in 2001 and the Shanghai Summit by Kazakhstan, China, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. So one country that is missing from Central Asia is Turkmenistan. The members are 10. So if you look at the members, SCO members, so we have China, Russia, plus 4 Central Asian Republic country minus Turkmenistan. So Turkmenistan is not part of this, plus India, plus Pakistan. They joined in 2017 in the Astana Declaration. And then we have 2 more countries, Iran and Belarus. So 6 plus 2 plus 2 is 10, right? So these countries are the original members of SCO, and these countries have joined recently, right? Now, what are the official languages? Russian and Chinese are the official language. And what is the structure? Structure, which basically means how they decide or what is their decision-making process. So first is that they have Council of Heads of States, which are the apex decision-making body. Secondly, they have also the Council of Heads of Government, which is the second highest council. Thirdly, they have 2 permanent bodies. One is the Secretariat in Beijing, which is in China, and the regional anti-terrorist structure RATS in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. So this is the structure and this is the mandate. Now, when it comes to UPSC mains, they have asked 2 questions from SCO, and here the emphasis is on the objectives, aim and objectives of SCO, and what importance does it hold for India. The same approach can be used or can be used for any other international body. For example, the same approach can be the same thing UPSC has asked with respect to I2U2, with respect to SARC, with respect to BIMSTEC. Right? So anytime any important international organization is there, we must understand its aim, its objective, and also how does it advance India's foreign policy. Secondly, they have also asked this question: virus of conflict is affecting the functioning of the SCO. In the light of above statement, point out the role of India. So what is the role of India in mitigating the problems that SCO faces? So SCO also has several internal problems, right? So what role India is playing to address this? So here we can talk about the SCO approach, where you can talk about the security, connectivity, and opportunity, right? The next news is about Center notifies 1 Sanrakshan Evam Samvardhan Amendment Rules 2025. Those who are watching from South India or those who do not understand this Hindi term, let me explain it to you. One basically means forest. Sanrakshan is conservation. And Evam is and. Samvardhan basically means augmentation. Augmentation or increase. You increase something, you augment something, right? So this is basically Samvardhan, you augmenting something. Of course, this is part of GS Paper 3 environment, and we'll look into what exactly is the basic uh, idea behind this. The one amendment rules 2025. So first thing that we need to know is that as part of this rules or notification, the validity of approval has been extended from 2 years to 5 years. So which means that once an approval is given for a particular project, it can be approved till 5 years, right? Earlier it was for 2 years. So if you look at the crux is that there are two things which are in contestation. First is in terms of there is development, and the second thing is conservation. And this basically plays out in a forest area. So for example, imagine that the government wants to construct certain linear projects like highways, like pipelines, which has to go from a particular forested areas. Now, what should be the approach of the government? Should the government abandon development for the sake of conservation, or should the government prioritize conservation and do not go for development? So here the approach has been to balance it out and to make sure that there are certain areas such as defense, such as critical energy elements, such as lithium are given priority. So this is how they have given or tried to implement the whole philosophy of balancing development with that of conservation. So validity has been extended. Second, for important projects such as defense, national importance project, it will be done through offline route, and the stage one and the stage approval will be clarified, which will be done in a speedier manner. So stage one essentially is pre-approval level, and stage two is the final approval or final clearance. So any project, just like you have environment impact assessment, which considers the impact of any major product or project on the environment, for any project which has some bearing on the forest clearance, there has to be a certain forest conservation principles associated. And for that, two stage of approval is required. First stage is here a prima facie approval is given. So in that, the project or those who are involved in the project can come, and they can come and check, they can do the mapping part, they can start uh, camping and start looking into resources. So first elementary price processing. Once the advanced processing is done or the final approval is done, then only they are supposed to lay down the roads, and then they are going to take advanced actions, right? Second is there is an option or there is a provision of compensatory offer afforestation, which means that if you are using or if you are destroying forest in some particular area, then you need to compensate it, and you need to provide or you need to ensure that there is some afforestation in some other place. So that is called compensatory afforestation. This is done through CAMPA initiative. And then there is concept of land banking. Central scheme afforestation has been allowed. States may transfer land post stage one. So again, the idea is that the process of development has been made more efficient. Third is that for strategic resources such as critical mining minerals, such as lithium or any rare earth element, the process has been made even more relaxed, and the minimum land usage has been reduced from 20 to 10 years. Then the enforcement, here more power has been given to the forest officers. Stricter monitoring and reporting mechanism is there so that these guidelines are not violated. Okay. So of course there are certain concerns as well. A lot of the critics have been saying that maybe relaxing all these provisions are not going to be in the interest of conservation. So again, this remains a debate. We'll look into this. If you look at the evolution of the Forest Conservation Act, which was passed in 1980, we'll understand how it basically came into force. So before 1980, when the Forest Conservation Act was passed, forests used to be in the state list. So here, how the forest was to be utilized was not decided by the central government, but it was decided by the state government, which did not have or which did not allow for a uniform policy making. And this led to large scale diversion of agriculture or industrial mining, right? Then in 1976, during the emergency time or the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, forest was shifted from state list to concurrent list. This meant that now center can also make law on this subject or item. Third, then Forest Conservation Act was passed in 1980, which centralized forest land diversion. So anytime any project is to be done in a place which is habited by forest, there has to be diversion. Now this, what should be the principle that will be applicable? That will be decided by the center and not by the state. The idea was to check deforestation. Then in 1988, an amendment was done to regulate leasing of forest land to private entities. Now, this was done before 1991 reforms or during the time of 1991 reforms, because mining or privatization was starting to take place, and therefore there was a demand for more privatization. In 2023 amendment, there was a balance, or there was an emphasis on balancing development with ecology, aligning it with the climate goals or the objectives which we had taken as part of our uh, INDC of Paris agreements. So basically, we wanted to balance development with conservation. The next news is about marine biodiversity treaties. Preparatory Commission concluded its second session, and this is part of GS3 environment, or we can also take it as part of GS2 international relations, as part of the global groupings or international groupings. Now, why this is in news? Because this particular treaty is about to come into force. Only 5 more countries are required to ratify this treaty, and once this is done, then it is expected to promote and protect the marine biological resources or biodiversity. So this treaty, which is also known as Agreement on Marine Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, or BBNJ, or the High Seas Treaty, will set rules for protecting marine life in the areas of oceans that lie outside national borders. So we know that as per the UN clause, different areas are divided differently in terms of usage by a nation. So within the 12 nautical miles, it is the territorial sea, and then you have exclusive economic zone up to 200 nautical miles, and then after that we have high seas. So basically, this treaty will be applicable to the high seas, not at the territorial sea, not at the exclusive economic zone, or till the continental shelf. So this area outside the exclusive economic zone will be part, or will be considered as part of this treaty, right? So this is basically also called as High Seas Treaty, which is very important. It will be set rules for protecting marine life. So what is the purpose? It is to protect marine life in the areas of oceans that lie outside the national borders in the exclusive economic zones. Okay. These areas cover, now why this is important? Because these high sea area cover nearly half the planet's surface, but have so far lacked strong protection. As of now, there is no protection mechanism which govern their usage. So just like you have Outer Space Treaty of 1967, which govern the thing that in the space it should not be weaponized, or nobody should have any specific sovereign a claim on space. Therefore, the same logic is also applied at the high seas level. Then the treaty was agreed in 2023 after years of negotiation, opened for countries to sign in 2024, and you need 60 countries to ratify it. If you look at India, India has signed the treaty, but India is yet to ratify the treaty. So, what is the meaning of signing and ratifying? A lot of you may have this confusion. So, signing a treaty means that it is basically an executive decision. So, if the government official goes there and say that we sign this, it means that they have shown an expression of interest. But unless this treaty is ratified, which means that it is passed by the legislature, it will not be ratified. So signing is essentially an executive decision, and ratification essentially is a legislative decision. If you look at some of the provisions of the treaty, there are four major provisions. First is in terms of the management of the marine genetic resources. And here it is essential that we know that a lot of marine resources are there which are yet to be explored, right? And for this, it talks about fair and equitable benefit sharing. Secondly, it talks about area-based tools which will ensure that the marine resources are protected. And for this, they have decided, or this is marine protected areas will be set up to manage the marine organisms. Especially, there are management tools that will protect and conserve them. Thirdly, there will be environmental impact assessments for any major project. Fourthly, it will also help in capacity building and technology transfer, which is one of the major area of concern of the global south, right? So it has everything for all the countries, yet there are several disagreements in terms of how much should be the technology transfer done, what should be the aspect of financial transfer, where should be the headquarter located, all these aspects. So again, because of that reasons, it is yet to be materialized, but it is expected that very soon it will come into force. Next, we'll talk about places in news. And here we have Afghanistan. As you may have known, that recently or yesterday only, an earthquake was hit Afghanistan of magnitude 6, which was a shallow earthquake of around 8 kilometer. So it was a shallow earthquake. It killed over 800 people and injured as many as 2,500 people. And it happened in the Kunar province of Afghanistan. So here you have to also understand what exactly is earthquake. What are the reasons why Afghanistan is prone to earthquake, right? And what are the mechanisms that can be done to overcome it? So what are India's strategies uh, in order to mitigate this earthquake issues, right? So here earthquake essentially is shaking of earth because of energy released from the earth's core or earth's crust, essentially because of the movement of the plate boundaries. And then there are various types of earthquakes. Essentially, there are shallow earthquake and there are deep earthquake. So you may think that the deep earthquakes will be more devastating in nature, but paradoxically, it is the shallow earthquake which are more devastating in nature. And the reason is because their focus is on a very small size, or it is very much closer linked to the surface of the earth. Therefore, the destruction is also very higher. Also, it is measured in terms of magnitude and intensity. Now, you tell me how magnitude is different from intensity. Okay. Now, this is the place in news. So we need to talk about some of the political features and the geographical features. So if you look at uh, Afghanistan, the map of Afghanistan, first thing is that it is a landlocked mountainous country, which means that it does not open its border to any sea or ocean, right? So it does not have any sea or ocean in its boundary. Second, it is also referred to as gateway of Asia. And which are the countries which border them? So we can see that there are certain South Asian countries, Central Asian countries, which are towards its north, which is Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, not Kyrgyzstan, but Tajikistan. Kyrgyzstan does not touch its border. Then towards the south, we have Pakistan, we have Iran, and also India. So India also touches its border. This is India. So India also touches its border. Okay, right. If you look at the geographical features, there are several major rivers that pass through Afghanistan: Amu Darya, Helmand River, Kabul River, and then the highest point is Mount Naushak, and there are certain mountain ranges: Hindu Kush, Pamir Mountains, and Safed Koh Range in the south. If you look at the climate, the country experiences a continental climate. Why? As we can see that because it is far from the ocean, so it will definitely have a continental climate. Then it is characterized by hot summers and cold winters. Now, why does uh, Afghanistan face so much earthquake? It's because it lies at the plate boundary where the Indian plates is colliding with the Eurasian plate. Okay, that is one of the primary reasons. Now, in UPSC has also asked map-based question from Afghanistan, and the question was exactly with respect to the political boundary, which of the above have borders with Afghanistan? Now you take a look at this. These countries: Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. You tell me which country does not, or which is the right answer here, because this is something that you would be able to solve it on what we have discussed. Next, quick updates. First is Yudh Abhyas. So as India-US relations goes into some sort of down spiral, it is a good news that we are still participating in joint exercises. And Yudh Abhyas essentially is the 21st edition of military exercise with respect to India-US joint military exercise uh, for various purpose. And this is being done since 2004. This joint military exercise has been held annually between India and US militaries. And what is the focus area? Focus area is on UN peacekeeping operations and enhancing readiness for multi-domain challenges. So what is multi-domain challenges? Multi-domain means that you not only focus on one area such as land, it is also inclusive of sea and air. Apart from that, you also consider informational warfare or warfare from any other area, security in different non-state territory as well. Now, from UPSC perspective, you need to know with which country we are conducting Yudh Abhyas for. Secondly, we also need to understand that this can be used as part of India-US area of cooperation. So one of the pillars of our areas of cooperation is defense. So within defense, there are several treaties which have been signed or agreements which have been signed. Apart from that, you can also mention Yudh Abhyas as one of the initiative or one of the ways in which we are implementing the capability and readiness of these agreements. Okay. Next news is with respect to Sena Spectabilis. Okay. And why it was in news? Because Kerala carried out India's first science-based community-driven eradication of Senna spectabilis in Wayanad. So what happened was that in 1980s, this Senna was introduced in Kerala, which was from South America, right? And initially they really liked it because it was very much resembling the Kerala state flower, Cassia fistula, known locally as Kanikona. So it was native to, so this was known as, it is called as an invasive species. Why? Because it altered soil chemistry and it deprived herbivores of food, as a result of which what happened was that the areas or the herbivores were driving out of from that area, from that location of Nilgiri, and because of that the uh, animals like lions and animals like tigers or the carnivores essentially were also stepping outside the reserve, and that was leading to man animal conflict. So because of this introduction, it was leading to a several havoc, and that is why Kerala introduced this initiative to eradicate Senna using community-based techniques. So community-based essentially indicate that we are using whole of society approach. Fine. So from the prelims basis, we need to understand some of the things, that what exactly is an invasive species, what are keystone species, and all the other important aspects, right? What are native species, right? Next news is with respect to jarosite. Researchers dated jarosite discovered in Kutch to be around 55 million years old. So India has found a huge deposit of jarosite uh, in Gujarat, which essentially is resembles the yellow-colored iron-rich sulfate mineral found or discovered on Mars in 2004 during the NASA's Opportunity mission. And on Earth, it is formed when some minerals containing oxygen, iron, sulfur, and potassium interact in the right quantities in the presence of water. So the important thing here to note is that the jarosite formation is typically associated with volcanic activity. So whenever you'll find jarosites, you can assume or you can understand that it has in some way been associated with volcanic activity. Secondly, presence of jarosite on Earth offers clues on the evolution of chemicals and minerals on Mars. So India also has a HOPE mission in Ladakh, which basically mirrors the climatic condition of Mars, right? In terms of the climate or in terms of temperature. Now, this again, this discovery is essential because it will allow us to study the chemical composition of jarosite more in depth way, and that will allow us to understand and study the Mars surface in a much more deep manner. Next is about solar energetic electrons, SEE. Now, recently, the Solar Orbiter Space Probe, which is basically a joint project by NASA and European Space Agency, they have tracked or traced the origin of solar energetic electrons, which is a very important news. Why? So first we need to understand what exactly are the solar energetic electrons. So in during sun, you'll see that most of there is huge electrons created in the sun before being thrown into space at nearly the speed of light. So essentially, from if you notice the surface of space, sun, there are several injections or there are several lights that are witnessed basically because of two reasons or two kinds of SEC or solar energetic electrons. One is connected to intense solar flares, which is the explosions from the smaller patches of the sun surface. So they're intermittently they are flickering. And the second one is massive ejections, which is called CMEs or coronal mass ejections, larger eruption of hot gas from the sun's atmosphere. Essentially, basically, they both are part of the same phenomena, but they happen in different intensities, right? Next, this probe has helped to understand space weather, which is has implication such as disrupting satellite communication and GPS navigation and interrupting power supply. So we have weather or we have earth weather where we understand how the climate is working and what is the uh, uh, pattern in terms of air current, etc. So space weather essentially will help us understand all these phenomena very well. And for that, understanding of SEE is going to be very monumental. The next news is about Pratyush. Pratyush is being developed by a team of Raman Research Institute. So, what exactly is Pratyush and what exactly is the idea of Pratyush? So, imagine you are standing or you are in a stadium and you want to listen to a very small flicker of noise or very small noise. So, what exactly do you do? That is where Pratyush comes into picture because here what the objective is to listen to a noise or uh, the verbal imprint of the cosmic dawn or the Big Bang theory, or the things which really started with the creation of universe. So for that purpose, the government or the Raman Institute has launched a future radiometer in the lunar orbit in the far side of the moon, which essentially is the place from where there is very less interference, audio interference. And the purpose is that it will reveal for the first time the history of our universe, set it transformed after the Big Bang. This can help detect a faint radio signal emitted from the hydrogen atoms, which carries imprints of several events of the cosmic dawn. So, what exactly is cosmic dawn? Is the time after the universe was formed, so the dawn of universe. So essentially, it will help us to understand what were the processes, what were the various aspects during the creation of the universe. And for this purpose, Pratyush is being used, which is probing reionization of the universe using signal from hydrogen. Okay. Next, Adivani. Adivani is the beta version of Adivani was launched by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. And what exactly is Adivani? It is India's first AI powered translation platform for tribal language. So the government has said that this Adivani is not merely a tool for translating the tribal languages, but essentially it will transform the identity and it will empower the tribals in a large way. So it is developed under the Janjatiya Gaurav Varsh to bridge communication gaps between tribals and non-tribals, because it is still witnessed that a lot of tribal do not understand the mainstream languages like Hindi, English, or any other language. So they have their own dialect, they have their own language. So it is essential that the non-tribals communicate with the tribals so that they can communicate and they can work effectively. So at this launch stage, it supports Santhali, which is prevalent in Odisha, Bhili, which is in Madhya Pradesh, Mundari in Jharkhand, and Gondi in Chhattisgarh, with Kui and Garo under development. So these are the languages which have now been developed. And the initiative will support digitization of endangered language, improve access to education, healthcare, and governance in native languages, facilitate tribal entrepreneurship, and serve as a knowledge resource for researchers. So, if you look at the larger trend, that India is doing a lot for the tribal population. In fact, very recently we discussed that for PVTGs, a separate scheme called PM Janman was launched. Before that, there was Adi Karmyogi initiative was launched, and there is also the Eklavya residential model schools are there. So the point is that India is taking a lot of initiative for inclusive development and inclusive growth, right? So in UPSC also there was a question in GS paper 1 2025 which talked about the approach of India's development with respect to the tribal population. So here we can use inputs from this side to further enrich our answer. Next, Niveshak Didi. The Investor Education and Protection Fund Authority launched phase 2 of its flagship financial literacy initiative. So here, what is important is two things. First, what is this initiative about? It is about financial literacy. That is the first thing that you need to know. The second thing that you need to know is about who has launched this. So it is launched by IEPFA, which is established by Government of India under the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, right? So it may seems that it is part of women and child development because it is providing financial literacy to women, especially the rural communities. But it works under corporate affairs and it is under Companies Act 2013. What is the aim? Aim is to promote investor education, awareness, and participation. And what are the functions? All these functions are there. What is important again is this: what is the objective and who is implementing this? That is all what is required as part of this news. So that is all about news today. Now you will be getting some questions on your screen. Make sure that you attempt those questions and also attempt those questions which I have discussed in the class. With this, I hope the session was good. Hopefully, you do all the questions. All the best. Bye.